In order for you and I to approach today's subject matter, we need to be honest with one another. You see, the Porsche Taycan, we've driven many together on the show, it is a technological tour de force. So much so, it beat out the Porsche 992 as the Performance World Car of the Year in 2020. But that didn't take into account the fact that the Taycan Turbo S is incredibly expensive. Yet that, what we're going to learn today, was setting the stage for something that's not quite rip your face off fast, but does leave a couple more shekels in the budget. Kicking things off with a headline, only one electric motor in the Taycan behind me. But really we need to focus on the architecture of the vehicle because that is almost identical to the 4S we've already driven. Specifically, the electric motor and the inverter are the same from that car. Even the battery packs are the same from that car. So that means the standard battery is made up of 28 modules of 12 cells each, which translates to 79.2 kilowatt hours. The performance battery, that's 33 modules of 12 cells each. That translates to 93.4 kilowatt hours. Remember the whole discussion we had in our Volkswagen ID4 episode about the difference between a 6.2 and an 11 kilowatt charger? That really doesn't apply here. Well, it sort of does because there is an option for an 11 kilowatt charger, but that's not what Taycans are about. As we learned in our Taycan Turbo and Turbo S episodes, they have crazy fast charging when you're out and about in those level 3 chargers. And it's all about the architecture, the wiring in the car to be able to do that. This one is no slouch either. In the standard battery, it's up to 225 kilowatts. In the performance battery, 270 kilowatts. But enough with all the EV business. This is still a Porsche, which means we need to tend to output. And that is broken out by standard and performance battery as well. In the standard configuration, 321 horsepower in a launch control mode that goes up to 402. The torque in either case is 254 pound-feet. Moving over to the performance battery side of the house, not quite what the 4S is, but it gets a bit closer. 375 horsepower or in launch control mode, 469 horsepower. In either one of those modes, in the performance battery, the torque is still 263 pound-feet. Which of course brings us to the performance figure. 0 to 60 is respectable, 5.1 seconds, and VMAX 143 miles an hour. With that, we're kind of like the U.S. Post Office. We still have to go through rain, sleet, or snow. 4,742 pounds, or depending on how you express your weights and measures, 2,151 kilograms. Now, a couple of huge notes about that. This car has the performance battery. If it didn't, it would be about 200 pounds less. But let's say, for the sake of discussion, you were to graft on an all-wheel drive system to either the small battery or the big battery. That's an additional 200 pounds on either one, and thus would make it a 4S. But wait, there's more. The Turbo and the Turbo S are just a shade under 400 pounds heavier than this. With that. Oh, this is pretty good, especially when the sun starts to come out. This is definitely quick. It's not the rip your face off as the Turbo and the Turbo S. Those physically hurt your face as they accelerate. This is something that you would say is a fast car. Now, for obvious reasons, this is not about the sweet spot of where the torque comes in. This is more about the difference of it from the 4S in terms of acceleration. This is more akin to other cars that people have experienced rather than that rush you feel from an electric car. Now, this car is a German market car, and no, Porsche has yet to hand any of these over to the US government for range testing. That said, I left the hangar today with 263 miles of posted range, and knowing I got easy 260, 270 on a 4S, I would say we're going to go probably up to 300. So yes, the most basic Taycan does not have a front electric motor, but the rest of the underpinnings are almost identical to the 4S you and I have already driven. A bit of a refresher, double wishbone in the front, multi-link in the rear. 19-inch wheels are fitted as standard, specifically that design in that color, but like every other Taycan, that can be changed. 20 inches or 21 inches. The brakes, 360 millimeter diameter rotors in the front, 358 in the back, 6 piston calipers in the front, 4 piston calipers in the rear. One thing they do change is the color of the calipers. In a basic Taycan, they're black. In a 4S, they're red. Now, the aspect that stands out about brakes in Taycans, whether it's this basic Taycan or something a bit more fancy like a turbo, is the regen, 265 kilowatts. We've driven a lot of electric cars before, and I can't say any of them can match that figure. Now pressing on to an aspect that I find fascinating as a Porsche nerd that's more partial to 911s. Believe it or not, Taycans, they have a lower center of gravity, and yes, that has everything to do with the battery, but that also plays into the decision of PASM being fitted as standard. But huge provision there. PASM is standard. The air ride, that is still optional, as is the four-wheel steering. And I would argue the combination of those two options are not just as important as they are to a 992, they are more important to this vehicle for 2 reasons. They mitigate the wheelbase and the extra weight. This flavor of Taycan has an advantage over other flavors of Taycan because the combination of less weight over the front wheels means as you get more aggressive into turns like this, the car will not plow as much. It's big, but you won't plow as much. Now this will come as absolutely no surprise. The steering is a rather sizable difference in the move from 4S to rear-wheel drive. Either way, I can't help but feeling the steering here may be a bit sharper, and in reality that may all be in my mind. What really is going on, by taking the drive wheels out of the front of the car, it highlights just how good the steering is in a Porsche Taycan, which brings us back to the raging debate since this car came out and all the comments I receive in my episodes from Tesla fanboys saying that this thing is a hunk of crap and the Tesla can do this, that, or the other thing better. Now, all the respect in the world to Elon and what he has built. I am a big fan. I come from the tech world, so I totally understand what this guy has created. But the reality is, this is a Porsche first, an electric car second. And the way the steering is set up is probably the biggest evidence of that, and it enables one to drive this, a Porsche first, aggressively on roads, meaning do more than just trot around town as you would in a golf cart. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game on the Options game with today's contestant, something that is very curiously billed as the most powerful basic Porsche ever built. I don't know if I'd be bragging about that, but I see where they're going with it, whatever they want to call it. It would be the 2021 Porsche Taycan. No turbo, no Turbo S, no 4S. They don't even call it the rear-wheel drive, they just call it the Taycan for a base price of $79,900. Put another way, that is about half the base price of a Taycan Turbo S. Let me press on to the color. Have I ever told you I got a buddy of mine that has a mother-in-law? It's one of those Mary Kay representatives. She doesn't have one of the Cadillacs, but believe it or not, they had a Pontiac from Mary Kay. Well, this is exactly the same color. So that's kind of an odd way of saying this is a pink Porsche. They call it frozen berry. The reactions have been all over the map. I've had people look at it like, oh my God, that's a great color. And then my hangar neighbor here, he's like, that is the worst color I have ever seen on the planet. Either way, it is an additional $800. Then the interior. This one is blackberry with a two-tone slate gray. Even though there is a contrast with a sort of pretty and pink exterior, it's not enough of a contrast. Either way, this is not a cheap option, $4,130. Then we move on to the Sport Design Package. And this gives one the opportunity to select the trim on the air dam, the diffuser, and the side skirts. In this case, not much creativity. They did black, but there are other selections on offer. Either way, $6,040. Then the electric sport sound. That's something we experienced on the Taycan for a same price here, $500. Then the performance battery we've been discussing, $5,780. Then the Sport Chrono package. This is different on a Taycan than it is on, say, a 992. Instead, what they do is they add 2 extra drive modes, a Sport Plus and an individual mode. then the knob on the steering wheel to adjust those drive modes, then of course the ubiquitous chronograph on the top of the dash, that is $1,320. Then arguably the most important option in this specific car, the four-wheel steering with the Power Steering Plus. The four-wheel steering transforms this vehicle and kind of the driving we're doing today, even with all that rain, $1,620. If you want the four-wheel steering, one must have the PASM Air Ride. So yeah, PASM is standard, but the air suspension is required for the four-wheel steering, $2,200. Then an option you guys know I love, the head-up display. Then the 4-zone HVAC system. That's additional money on an $80,000 car, $990. Can we fix that? All of the Taycans we have previously featured on the show did not have that secondary display over on the passenger side. Well, this is the first car that finally has it. So I guess we had to put up with pink to get the secondary display. Either way, it is $1,130. It is a very neat touch. I don't know if it's necessary, but it's quite a party trick I know my nephews would love. And then the roof. Remember how we discussed in the first Taycan episode that in Europe, the slick top was fitted as standard, but in the US, the glass roof, that was fitted as standard. And I really love that idea. Well, apparently, the Americans are now following the Europeans, where the slick top is fitted as standard starting with this car, and that makes its way to all Taycans if one wants the glass roof, which does not open. That is an additional $1,490. The only other thing we have to add to this is the destination and handling von Zuffenhausen, Deutschland, $1,350, which brings us to the full retail price of $106,480 for the $80,000 Taycan. Unlike the steering and the acceleration, I can't honestly tell you there's a huge difference in the brake feel or the pedal modulation. This feels very much like a Taycan, and for the avoidance of doubt, that means there's a bit of an on-off switch to it. Now, one does have control over that. Like all other Taycans, the regen can be switched on and off manually. You and I have been doing it with the regen on throughout this entire episode. Now, out of all the times you and I have experienced a Taycan and their brakes, this is probably the most real-world scenario with all this water on the road. And my feedback is it feels 80% like the brakes of a performance car. 20%, it feels like a green car. Truth be told, you and I knew this was coming, and the dead giveaway was when someone in Zuffenhausen had the bright idea to call an electric car a turbo. Yes, the internet went crazy about that, but all they were doing was messaging that this, a Porsche with an electric propulsion system, will be a Porsche like any other and on offer in different flavors that are named the same. So my guess, there will probably be a GTS coming up down the road here, but you and I now have had the opportunity to sample a couple of different flavors. And it's similar to the flavoring, say, in like the 992 world. In 992, now there's a turbo and a non-turbo turbo. And they all have the same personality. They're great, but they all have the same personality. It's just the Turbo S, it's literally the volume turned up to like 115. Where years ago you would drive like a 911 Turbo and the thing wanted to kill you, where the most basic 911, it didn't want to kill you. This, it doesn't have quite that delta. The Turbo S absolutely rips your face off. This, however, occupies two disparate positions in that same universe. First would absolutely be, out of all the Taycans we have driven, this is the best daily driver for no other reason than the lower weight. And then the second, this is a bit more subjective and depends on where one lives. This is the best driver's car out of all of the Taycans, again for the same reason, less weight, which pushes us into the wish list, and you probably know where I'm going with this. Can we have a Taycan that is lighter? 4,500 pounds for the lightest Taycan, that's a bridge too far. 5,600 pounds for the fastest Taycan, that's a bridge way too far. What I'm thinking is let's try something that just doesn't exist. How about an EV? I don't care if it's a 4-door or a 2-door, but an EV that's 3,000 pounds, 3,200 pounds. Granted, I know I'm asking for a lot here, but imagine the performance of a vehicle that weighs 3,000 pounds with instant torque that has the driving dynamics of a Porsche, that would literally bend the space-time continuum. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but that's what I'm putting on the wish list. Which of course brings us to the point where I ask you to opine in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all one word, MotoManTV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. What should be added to that wish list, or you're just gonna go with my super duper GT3 lightweight Porsche Taycan or other coming Porsche EV that is not an SUV? Comments below. Now, with that, look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And when I bitch and moan about silvers and grays and blacks, when you give me another color, can it not be pink? Bis später.